All right, hello to everybody that is tuning in for the Code Naturally live class. Just take this time to log into your Code Naturally account. If you don't already have an account, it will give you there's a link in the description basically that you can go to. You can comment also if you need help, and one of our educators will be in the comments ready to help you out. But just head over to app.codenaturally.com. You can also go to try.codenaturally.com. Your account might be there. Or if you need to make a new account, that's actually going to be the fastest way to do it for today. I'm going to start a new sketch and I'm going to name it Survival. And I'm going to move it over into advanced, and I'm just going to wait here for a minute for anybody to catch up, sign into their account, and just go ahead and start a new project called Survival. Hopefully this is working for everybody so that everyone can see me and know what's going on. I'm on a little bit of a delay, so if you comment and you ask a question, I might not be able to get to you right away, but I'll do my best to either reply to your comments or make sure that someone is replying to whatever you're saying. And then let us know in the comments, let us know if this is a really easy way for you to tune into class, if this was kind of tricky for you. We should have these recorded and available for you to watch just on our YouTube channel. And we also have a ton of other projects that are on our YouTube channel available for you to code along with us, or there's also some lessons on there just to learn some new concepts. For today, you want to make sure that you're really comfortable with variables, that you are comfortable with doing conditional statements, and we also want to make sure that we are just comfortable with being an advanced in the first place. So if you've never done an advanced sketch before, I recommend that you get out of this video, go look at our video from last Thursday when we did our beginner class, and code along with that one. And you can always come back here and try this one again. All right, so I'm gonna assume that everybody has logged into their account by now, started a new sketch, given it a name. We're going to be coding Survival together, which is a game that some of you might have done before. It's actually in our workbook, so if you have done it before, this is just great practice to be doing it again. And if you've never done it before, this will be a fun first-time project for you. I'm basically going to be reading from the workbook that I have right in front of me, just reading you each step, and then we'll be coding it together. You can see my screen and see what I am coding. So I'm going to go ahead and press go, start my sketch, and I'm just going to move function draw down, or function setup down, so that you guys can still see me and see all of the code that I'm writing. I'm also just going to change the width and the height of my project. This is not something that you have to do. It's just something that I like to do personally. I just think that it is a little bit easier to work with when you have a smaller canvas. It gives you distinct lines that you definitely know and can see. Instead, you can choose to just like zoom out, but I like to just make it 600 by 400 to get started. So the first thing that our survival game wants us to do is to go to function setup and include the line rect mode center. The reason that it does this is because normally when you do the code for a rectangle, it's the top left corner of the rectangle that you're writing the code for. But for this game, we want to code for the center of our rectangle simply because later on down the line, when we use the distance formula, it's going to be easier for us to do the distance from the center of the rectangle as one of our variables rather than having the top left corner. It would kind of mess up the game and make it so that you could get away with it if the ball hit you on the bottom right hand corner. So basically the point of this game is that you are a small square and you're going to be running away from a giant bouncing ball. But think of that as your enemy, and you are, as a rectangle, going to be able to move with arrow keys, and that'll allow us to move around our screen freely, which will be fun to control our character. All right, so we're going to go into function setup. We're going to include the line rect mode and then in parentheses center. And you want to make sure that your center is in all caps. The M in rect mode is capitalized. And you want to make sure that this is going inside of the curly brackets of function setup. So we'll go ahead, add in that line. Then the next instruction from our workbook says between function setup and function draw, so right here, you want to create 4 variables called player X, player Y, player speed, and timer. So that's a lot of information. So I'm just going to clear some space down here. I like to have some extra space to work with. So I'm going to start with my first variable that tells me to make. So the first one is player X. So you want to put VAR space and then player X. And you can choose if you want to do an uppercase or a lowercase x. It really doesn't matter as long as you do it the same way throughout. I just like to use the lowercase x because I think that it is easier to remember to do every time. So now we're going to go and make that equal, let's see, 50. So we want our player's x to equal 50. I'm going to end that line with a semicolon, and then I'm going to make another variable for my player's y coordinate, which also equals 50. So far we've done the x and the y coordinates for our player, and the next 2 commands I wanted us to do were have the player speed and the timer. So again, I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call it player speed, and we want that to equal 5. We'll go down 1 line and make another variable called timer and have that equal 0 because we want our timer to count up from 0, right? So now that I have these 4 variables set and ready to go, those are definitely not the only variables that we're going to be using in this game, but just our starting variables. So now I'm going to go into my function draw, and I'm going to put in a background. I'm also going to just clear some space. I just like to have some extra space to work with here. And you can choose to make your background any color that you want. And really try to make this unique. So when you're doing your project, you can use any colors you want, you can use any shapes you want, you can make them bigger or smaller sizes. It really doesn't matter. There's going to be some ways that I'll show you at the end of the game too, where you can modify it to make it a little bit harder or add different rules or different levels to it. And in the link in the description, there's a link for a way to submit your projects. So that's going to be really useful for us to be able to see what you've been making, and maybe it's not the project that we made all together, but a project that you've made that you're really proud of. You can submit your project there and we can check it out. And we also want to make a video for YouTube sharing a bunch of student projects. So it would be awesome if you guys could share your projects that you've been working on. So after we put in our background, we want to draw a rectangle character which has 50 width and 50 height. The x and the y coordinates for that are going to be our variables that we already made. So we're going to make a rectangle for a character. We're going to make it at player x, comma, player y. The next thing that we want to do is make it 50 by 50. Like I said, use some creativity, make these different shapes different colors if you want. I'm going to add in a fill command for this guy. Let's go with blue. And then I always add in the no stroke command. I just don't like the outlines on the outside of the shapes. You can choose if you want to add that line in or not, totally optional. So now that I have added in my character, I want to add in the conditional statements, the if statements, that will make it so that my character moves with my key commands. So right now, go over to your settings bar and click on the key picker. The key picker is going to be super useful for us. It's going to allow us to just click on this button, click any key that we want to find the code for, and it'll appear. So that makes it way easier for us to do these next few steps. So we're going to say if, and then we're going to add key, capital I is, capital D down, and then another set of parentheses. This is where we're going to go over to our key picker. You can choose if you want your character to move with the arrow keys or if you want them to move with WASD or whatever keys you want. Maybe if you want to make it a two-player game with two characters on the screen, you can use the WASD and the arrow keys for two different players. That would be a great way to modify this game at the end. But for now, I am just going to go to my key picker. I'm going to press the up arrow. I just want to use the up and down commands. And I'm going to add in 38 there, ending it with a set of curly brackets. And this is an area where commenting your code is super, super helpful. So I really recommend that you comment your code. If you don't know what that is, you just put 2 slashes in front of whatever you're writing, and that makes it so that the computer doesn't read what you're putting in there. So in this case, I'm just going to say, this is my up arrow, and that's going to be super helpful because now if I notice like, oh, my character actually isn't moving the way I want it to, I can go to the up arrow, if that's the command I'm having problems with, and see what's wrong in the code. So inside of the curly brackets, I'm going to say what I want to happen. So if the up arrow is down, then what I want to happen is I want something to happen to either my player's X coordinate or my player's Y coordinate. So let's see, if it's moving up, I'm going to be changing the Y coordinate. So I'm going to say player Y equals player Y, and then I need to decide, is it +1 or -1? So I'm going up, and the numbers are getting smaller as I'm going up. That means that I want to do player Y minus, and this is going to be our player speed. So let's see if this works. Click back on your canvas and press up, and yep, it works. So my character is moving up. He can kind of escape the screen right now. We'll fix that later. So take this time to do the rest of the key commands for the rest of your arrows or letters that you chose to do. A really easy way to do this is just to copy what you did, paste it down here, and then just change it. So instead of doing up arrow, I'm going to do the down arrow now. I'm going to go over to my key picker. I'm going to see that it's 40, so I'll change this key command to 40. And instead of having my player's Y coordinate get smaller, I actually want to have it get bigger since it's going down. So I'm going to change this to a plus sign. All right, and then you always want to check them when you're done. If you don't, it can get a little bit confusing, but yep, this is working. So it's moving up and down. You can see that my character isn't moving left or right yet. That's because I haven't done those commands yet. That's coming up next. And if you're noticing that you have an error message coming up, something's wrong with your code, I would check your spelling. I would check your capitalization. Did you capitalize player Y in your variable or did you leave it lowercase? I would make sure that you're spelling player speed right. It's really easy to leave out one of those letters. It's a really long name for a variable. Or let's see, what else could be wrong? Oh, you also want to check that your key commands are correct. That's one that can really mess it up, is if you press the wrong key and then put in the code for it and then you're realizing that it's not working. It might just be that you put the wrong key command in. So I'm going to just copy the rest of this. And like I said, it's really useful to be able to copy and paste. You just want to make sure that you're changing everything. So if you have, more than one section of code that does the up arrow, it's not the end of the world, but you want to make sure that you have everything labeled correctly and you have the right numbers in there. So right now these are both 38 and 40, which they are there. I'm going to go over to my key picker, click my right arrow, and I'm going to see that 39 is the number I'm looking for. Oops. So I'm going to change this to 39. Then I'm going to go to my left arrow and see that that's 37. All right, so the last thing that I need to fix here is that this is not correct. That is not what I want to happen. So if I left that like that, right now, when I'm clicking my left and right arrow keys, my character is moving up and down. That might be a fun like modification or like different kind of game where you have to think about the way your character is moving with the wrong arrow keys. That could be a really cool idea for this game, but that's not what my goal is right now. So I'm going to change these. I'm going to make this player X instead of player Y. And then, so 39 is my right arrow. So when my character moves to the right, are those numbers getting bigger or getting smaller? They're getting bigger, right? So instead of having minus player speed, I want to have plus player speed there. Then I'm going to change this one. Make sure you're changing to the X's, player X. And I want this one to be minus. All right, so now try out all of your keys and make sure that they are working. And it looks like my character is able to freely run around the screen, which is awesome. That's exactly what we're looking for. So these are all done. A really useful thing that you can do is press these little triangles that are on the left of your if statement, close them up, and just make sure that this little sandwich is just including the information for that key. It's really easy when you're doing the curly brackets to accidentally put in two if statements inside of the same set of curly brackets, or to even put more than that. So we want to make sure that we're just including the information that we want for that arrow key. So once you've done that, you've put in all of your key commands and you've made sure that everything is working right. You make sure that your character is able to move around the screen in the way you want it to. We are going to go on to the next step. So looking at the next step, it says to create 4 conditional statements. Oh, we just did that one. Never mind. Oh, there we go. So we want to add in some conditional statements that check if our character leaves the screen. So if your character was able to leave the screen but the enemy wasn't, there would be no point in playing the game. You would always win. If your enemy could leave the screen but you couldn't, it would also be really hard to do that because you can't really predict where the enemy is going to come from. So we want to make this as fair and fun as possible. So we are going to add in some statements that check if our character leaves the screen. So I'm going to start by leaving top screen, and I'm just going to practice throughout this whole time commenting on my code. You should be doing that too. It's a really, really useful way to keep your code organized, and as you get into more complicated projects, this is going to save you a million times. So if my character leaves the top screen. So basically what I want to be checking here is if my players Is it his X value or Y value? So if we're talking about the top screen, it's going to be the Y value. So if my player's Y value is less than 0, then what I want to happen is I want player Y to equal 0. And this is just a really easy way to make sure that your character cannot leave the screen. So see, I can go halfway off the screen, but I cannot go all the way off the screen. So if you want it to be so that the edge of the character can't go off the screen, you can use 25 instead of 0. I'm just going to use 0 for this. So we're going to do the same thing for the bottom limit of the Y. So for our bottom screen, so I'm going to leave bottom screen, I'm going to say if, and in parentheses, player Y is greater than whatever you want your Y boundary to be. So like I said earlier, I modified my canvas to make it just a little bit smaller. If you didn't do that, that's totally fine. You just want to choose the number where the boundary is going to be. Maybe use a giant rectangle to mark where the edges are. But you definitely want to make sure that you are marking that off in some way. So if player Y is greater than, I used 400 as my boundary, then I want player Y to equal 400. All right. So take a little bit of time to do this for your player Ys and for your player X's. I'm going to come back and do mine in just a second. I just have to grab my computer charger. So I will be right back to do that. Just in the meantime, work on your player Y and your player X boundaries. All right, ready to go. So by now you should at least have your player Y boundaries in there. I'm going to put in my player X boundaries now. So that would be the leaving left side of my screen and the leaving right side of my screen. I'll start with the left though. So the left side of my screen is going to be 0 on my X axis. So I'm going to say if player X is less than 0, then player X equals 0. And we'll test these out just to make sure they're working. So my top one is working, left one's working, bottom one's working, right one does not exist yet. So got to put that one in. I'm going to go down and write leave right screen. And you can put different comments in here. Leaving top screen might not make the most sense to you. You can make it top boundary. You can make it Y boundary, something like that. Whatever is easiest for you and something you can remember. So leave right screen, we're going to say if, and then in parentheses, player X is greater than whatever your X boundary is. Like I said, changed my screen, made it a little smaller. So I'm going to make mine 600. And I'm just going to say player X equals 600. All right. So now we have a top, a bottom, and a left and right boundary that all work and make it so that our character cannot escape. Ta-da! Okay, cool. So the next thing that we're going to do, we just did everything for our player that we needed to do to start. So we're going to go back up above function draw and we are going to start working with our enemy. So we're going to make some more variables. Our first one is going to be called ball X. and that is going to be equal to where our ball's x-coordinate starts. So I'm going to set that at 400. You can set it somewhere else. I just chose 400 randomly. Doesn't really matter. Okay, another variable for ball y. You're going to set that one equal to, let's just do 300. Then you're going to notice that we're going to make two speed variables here. So we just had one for our player, but for our ball, our enemy, we are going to have a variable for the speed of the x and for the speed of the y. So var speed x and var speed y, I'm going to set them equal to var speed x equals 4, var speed y equals 5. Doesn't really matter what you set these two equal to. The reason that we do two of them is because we're going to have this ball bounce around the screen, and you're going to notice that we're going to have to talk about positive versus negative speed in the code. That'll make more sense in just a second. So making sure that you are outside of your last conditional statement. We don't want to be inside of this curly bracket, but still inside of the closing curly bracket of function draw, which starts up there. We are going to start typing in some more code. So here we want to draw the enemy circle using ball x and ball y as the coordinates, with 100 as our width and 100 as our height. As I've said before, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine. This project will be really cool if you add some personality to it, add some unique ideas or design to it. So just remember yours design. So I'm going to add an ellipse, make it ball x, ball y, width and height of 100. Give it a second, make sure it's where we want it. There we go. Okay, so then I don't want my ellipse to be the same color as my character. I just think it'll be a little confusing. It might be kind of cool because they would like blend together, but by the time they run into each other, the game should be over anyways if it works properly. So I'm gonna just choose a different color. Let's make it, I'm really concerned about all these colors matching up right now. Really want to make sure I choose some good ones. Let's just do a darker blue color. Okay, so we now have our enemy ball, but it doesn't move yet. So the next thing that we want to do is move below our ellipse, and we want to create two statements that change and move ball x and ball y with speed x and speed y. Easy enough, right? So same way that we move anything, same way that we moved our player, we want to do ball x equals ball x plus, let's go up, and we want to use speed x. So I just went up to double check because I couldn't remember if we had done x speed or speed x. So it's always just good to go up and double check. Also double check if you use capitals or lowercase letters. That'll make a big difference in your game. So the next thing that I'm going to do is the ball y. So it's moving on the x coordinate now, but I want it to move on the y. So I'm going to do ball y equals ball y plus speed y. So same exact thing as the line before, and you can see that it's now moving in kind of diagonal line, which is great. That's exactly what we want it to do. And the next thing that we're going to do is create, create the 4 if statements that keep the ball bouncing around inside of the screen. So this is going to be really easy for us because we just did this, right? It's going to be a little bit different from how we did it before, but I promise you it'll work just the same. So I'm going to make a ball boundaries comment, and then I'm just going to add all my ball boundaries underneath here. So I'm going to say if ball y is greater than my biggest y value, which is 400, then what I want to happen, instead of having it stick at one spot like I had it do with my key commands, what I want it to do is basically bounce. So think about when you are walking. If you're taking a step forward, that's positive speed. If you're taking a step backwards, that's negative speed. So what we want to do here is have it go from positive speed and change to negative speed. So we're going to go to where it says if ball y is greater than 400, then what we want to happen is we want speed y to equal negative speed y. So you can see that it bounced off of that edge. That's why I chose this one to start with, so that we could actually see it working. The next one that it bounces off of is the right wall. So let's just do that one together as well. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do together is the right wall, like I said. So that's going to be the upper limits of our x coordinates. So if ball x is greater than, let's see, my limit is 600, then I want speed x this time to equal negative speed x. So that'll just take whatever direction it was traveling in and turn it the other way. So far so good. The next thing that we want to do is our top boundary. We might as well do that one since that's the last one it bounced off of, or didn't bounce off of. So if ball y is less than 0, then what we want to happen is speed y equals negative speed y. All right, so it's working, left wall's not working. So let's start a new if statement outside of the curly brackets of the last one. If ball x is less than 0, then you guessed it, speed x equals negative speed x. All right, so we now have our bouncing ball that is going off of the walls, but it's not bouncing in our way, which is fine for now. So right now, if my ball is to run over my character, nothing's going to happen. See, just happened. Nothing happened. We want to make it so that if the ball hits the square, then our character loses the game. So we're going to work on that in just a minute. Before we get there, we want to work on our timer, because this is going to be a really fun game for you to play with friends and maybe siblings. Maybe you can challenge your parents to it to see who can survive the longest. And the timer is a really important part of that. So we're now going to draw our attention to the timer. We're going to write a statement that increases the timer by 1/60th. So the reason that we do this is so that it grows in increments that are similar to our seconds. If we did timer equals timer plus 1, it would move way faster. So just like I said, or just like you should know, everything in function draw happens 60 times every second. So if I say to add 1/60th, that means that every second it will add 1. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So everything in function draw is read by the computer 60 times every second. If we add in the line, timer equals timer plus 1/60th, then if it reads it 60 times every second, it'll actually add 1 second every second. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, add in a comment and we will fix that. So what I'm going to do now is make my timer visible. So I'm going to use a text command I'm going to say text, and when we're talking about a variable that we want to be displayed, we don't put it into quotation marks. But if you want to put in quotation marks for, maybe you want it to say timer and then have the number, I'll show you how to do that. So inside of quotation marks, we'll put timer, and then after that, we'll do plus timer. Then what we want to do is tell it where to go. So I'm going to choose 500, 100, and that should be working. Yeah. So you can see now that my timer looks a little bit crazy. So let's fix that up a little bit. So let's add in a fill command. Let's make it, I'm just going to make mine black. All right, and then I want it to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to use a text size command. All right. And I'm going to make it, let's see, 30. All right, so if I make my text size 30, that is what my timer looks like. So you can't actually tell how crazy it looks. So I'm going to move it over to the left a little bit so we can talk about the next important thing. All right, so now you can see it. So do you see all of the numbers that come after our initial timer number? That's not what we want. So we can use round, and then in a set of parentheses, we'll write timer. So now our timer is nice and rounded. It doesn't look like a giant string of endless numbers that is really stressful and confusing. If you like it that way, you can totally leave it like that. It's completely up to you to use your design skills to make it look however you want. And if you don't want it to say timer before that, you can just erase this little bit. You can change the text size to make it bigger or smaller. You can make it a different color. That's totally up to you. You can also add in, like, maybe a cool idea would be to add, you know, maybe like some kind of bracket or some kind of levels. Like if you get past 60 seconds, you're a master. If you get past 100 seconds, you're a pro, something like that. That would be a fun addition to put in there. So the next thing that we want to do is, now that we have our timer ready to go, we're going to start doing our conditional statement that is going to use the distance function to check the distance between our player and our enemy. This is what is actually going to make the game playable. So I'm going to make some more space. Again, making sure that your curly bracket is at the bottom. You do not want to be coding outside of that curly bracket. The computer will tell you to stop pretty much right away. So just make sure that you are doing that. And we are going to use distance. So I'm going to say if, and then it's in a set of parentheses, dist, D-I-S-T. And that means, basically what I've written so far means if the distance between, then I'll make a set of parentheses, and we're going to put the x and y coordinate of the first point and the x and y coordinate of the second point. And this will help us check the distance between those 2 points. So the first point we're going to use is the center of the rectangle. That's why we used rect mode center in the setup earlier. So we're going to use the center of our rectangle, which is player X, comma, player Y. And then in the same line inside of the same set of parentheses, we want to say ball X, comma, ball Y. So far this reads, if the distance between player X and player Y and ball X and ball Y, now I'm going to say if it is less than a certain number, so let's start with 75, then I'm going to say whatever I want to happen. So now it's going to check if the distance between the center of this ball and the center of this rectangle is less than a certain number, so if they're really close to each other, then what do we want to happen? So we're going to make this one Pretty easy. We're just going to add in a black background. We are going to make speed x equal 0 and speed y equal 0, and this will stop moving our ball, because what's going to happen basically is if you don't add these lines, your character will lose, but then they'll be able to win again as soon as the distance is big enough. So by stopping the ball in its tracks, we make it so that if your character lost, they actually lost. They don't get a second chance. So you can see that it's working right now. I'm going to take out these lines to just show you what would happen if we took those out. So go over, try to lose, and you saw it only makes the background black when my ball is right on top of my player. So that's not what we want. We want to actually be able to win or lose the game. So I'm going to add those back in. And then I'm going to add in a fill command and add in some text. And you can make your text say whatever you want. You lose, game over, good try. Maybe if you are feeling a little bit more advanced, you can add a game over and then a play again button. A play again button would be an awesome thing to add into this project, because then you can just keep playing it continuously. You don't have to like reset the screen every time. There's a video on our YouTube channel that is all about making on-screen buttons. So you can go ahead and click on that if you want some more help. There's also a whole video on how to code survival if you want to watch this again. We should be posting this video as well, so totally up to you. I'm going to make it say, I'm going to do all caps, game over, right? And I'm just going to tell it where to go. Let's just start with 200, 200. I'll see if I like the way that looks and if I like the size. Yeah, that looks good to me. So if I were making a play again button, I would probably just put it right underneath here, right underneath the game over, so that right as the game is over, right as you lose the game, you can press that button and play it again. So that's it. So some ideas for how to change or improve this game, how to make it unique. I would say adding in a play again button would be super cool. You could make it so that if the timer reaches a certain number, something automatically happens, like a second ball comes on the screen, or maybe the ball speeds up, or maybe your character gets to move faster. That would be a really cool one to add in. Trying to think of what else. Oh, I've seen versions of this game where as time goes on, the ball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So there's actually no way to win the game, because eventually the ball will get so big it fills up the screen. So I guess that you would win if you make it to the point where the ball fills up the whole screen. I've seen versions, like I mentioned earlier, where there's two characters on the screen, and one is controlled by WASD and the other is controlled by the arrows. So what you can do is have two people playing at once, both avoiding the same ball bouncing around the screen. And for that, you would want to make the ball and the characters a little bit smaller so that they're easier to control. And then, what did they have? Oh, they had it so that if one of the characters died, basically those controls don't work anymore. Your character stays where it is until the other player comes over and tags them. So if the distance between your character and the other character is less than a certain amount, you can tag them back in, basically. That would be an awesome idea. Add in the comments any of your ideas. Make sure that you're checking on our website. We have a bunch of resources for you guys. Hopefully this has been an easy transition for everybody and everybody is doing okay with online classes. I know that it's kind of weird, but we'll be fine. Still got Code Naturally going, which is awesome. So use those resources. Go onto our website, check for any of the, let's see, you can submit your project, you can request a new account if you don't already have one, or if you only have a try.codenaturally account. This is a great way for you to get a permanent account totally for free. Trying to think of what else. Check our YouTube channel. We have a ton of videos. Add in the comments if you have any specific videos that you want us to add. If there's something that you've been wanting to learn, if you have a project that you've been having problems with, add it in the comments. We can go check it out and we can get back to you about how to fix it. But yeah, really take advantage of all the resources that you have access to right now. So that's about it for the how to code survival portion. So use this time now to ask questions, to add some modifications to your projects. There should be someone checking out all of the questions that you guys have in the comments. Let's see. All right, so maybe I'll add in a few of those modifications. I'm just going to pause the screen for a second. If you need help, I'm going to go try to check out the comments and see if I can help you guys out. All right, so since there's still a few people watching, which is awesome, I will just take this time to, I guess I'll show you guys how to add in a play again button. I feel like that's a really easy one to add in, and that's a really useful thing to know how to do. So we are going to add in a button, basically. So inside of our distance, we want to add that button in because that's where we have our game over. That's where we have our, that's where we would want to have the button to play the game again. So I'm going to look, I'm going to see that 200, 250 is where I would want that button to be. So I'm going to start by adding in a rectangle, 200, 250. I think it was like 200 wide, maybe 50 tall. The great thing about coding is that if you make a mistake, you can always go back and fix it. So, oh yeah, that is not right. Oh, it's because we have rect mode center. So right now 200, 250 is the center. I actually want the center to be 300, 250. Or 300, yeah, 300, 200 is fine. Oh, that was not the right one to fix. Like I said, great when you're coding to be able to go back and change some of these things right when you need to fix them. All right, so now I'm going to lose the game on purpose, hopefully. There we go. So that looks better. I'm actually going to just add some text in here that says, play again, question mark, and I'm going to make that at, let's do 300, 250, just see what it looks like. We can always move it later. Oh yeah. So one, I want to move it to the left a little bit, so I'll make this 225. Why not? And then I actually want to change the fill color because right now it is filled in white, which is going to blend in with my button, but you'll see that if I put the fill command here, it'll actually fill my button that color too. So I'll go back and add another fill command. You could actually just change the order of these two. That would work the same way. Oh, and actually, what you want to do is make sure that your, oh my gosh, there we go. So you want to make sure that your text comes after your button. Silly mistake, because your rectangle will appear first on the canvas right now, and then the text will appear, because whatever happens first in the lines of code happens first on the screen. So I basically just made it so that my rectangle would go over my text, so I would never be able to see it. There it is. That looks a little bit better. I'm going to make this a little bit lower just because I am kind of a perfectionist when it comes to that stuff. And I'm going to make it a little bit higher than that. So 270 is good. Like I said, play around with it, have fun, make it different colors. That'll make it a lot more fun to play your game if you make it unique to yourself. All right, so I'm going to just leave that the way it is. Got a play again button, and I'm going to just use a piece of scratch paper and I'm going to write down what the left, right, and top and bottom boundaries of my button are. This is just an easier way to do it if you're dealing with a button that's actually not on your screen, that's going to be up while you're coding. So I'm just going to do that right now. So my left boundary is at 200, my right boundary is at 400, my top boundary is at 225, my bottom is at 275. Okay, so now we can start actually doing the code for our button. Like I said, if you need a little bit more help with doing buttons, we have a YouTube video available for that. That is going to be super, super helpful. So I'm going to start by saying if, and you'll notice that the computer's already mad at me, which is fine for this right now because I don't need to see the button. So if mouse X, and mouse X is just a built-in variable that the computer already knows. So it's a great one to use because it's just your mouse's X coordinate. So it would change with my mouse as it's moving. But I'm going to start by saying if mouse X is greater than 200, because that was my left boundary. And then I'm going to say and mouse capital X is less than 400. So if my mouse's X coordinate is bigger than this number, but less than this number, so if it's somewhere in that sweet spot, then I want the button to be clickable. But I have to add that in. So basically what you're doing is you're nesting 3 if statements together. So we're going to start with the mouse X, then we'll do the mouse's Y coordinate, then we'll do the if we press our mouse. So I'm going to do another if statement, this time with mouse capital Y. Make sure that you capitalize these ones because they're built-in variables. They have to be written the same way, obviously, just like the way that we write our variables and then refer to them later on. So make sure that you're doing that. We're going to say if mouse Y is greater than 225, which is the upper line of my button, and mouse Y is less than 275, which is the bottom line of my button. Like I said, I wrote these down on a piece of sketch paper. I really recommend doing that if you don't have your button visible on the screen. I could have just paused the code and made it visible on the screen. Doesn't really matter. Whatever way is easiest for you. So those two are nested together. Now I need to make it if mouse capital I is capital P pressed. And you really want to make sure that these are, they are nested together like this, and that the mouse is pressed is all one word, no spaces, capital I and a capital P. Then you want to end it with another curly bracket. So we're going to have a total of 3 opening curly brackets and 3 closing curly brackets. If you're missing even one of these, the entire code won't work. Really take advantage of these little buttons on the side to help tie it up and make it look nice. So inside of this, we want to basically start everything over again. So we basically want to say our timer is going to equal 0 again. Our speed x that we set to 0 here is going to go back to 4. Our speed y is going to go back to 5. We want to even reset our player's x coordinate and our player's y coordinate. You really want to reset all of these that you made. You could just copy and paste them down there. I'm not going to do that right now just because I want to walk through this with you, but you would just have to erase the var in front of everything. So we want player x to equal 50, player y to equal 50. Let's see. It's also really helpful if you do them in the order that these are in, but player speed actually didn't change, but might as well just throw it in there. Ball x and ball y. Oh, I think I did those wrong. I think ball y equaled 300. Ball x equals 4. All right, so let's give this a try and see if it works. There might be something that I forgot to add in here. Like I said, great thing about coding is that you can always just go back and try again. That was a little weird. I'm going to try to clear my canvas and do that again. Not sure why that happened. Maybe I'll go up here and make it so that player speed equals 0. That way I can't move. I think that that's what's going on. Yeah, so now it's working. So include in your distance that the player speed equals 0. We did it for the ball, but we're going to do it for the character as well. So now when I press the play again button, everything is back to normal. Pretty cool, right? So just a repeat of everything I just did. I made a clickable button on my you lost screen or my game over screen, whatever you want to call it. And I made it so that if you click on that button, everything resets. So your timer goes back to 0. Your speed for your player and for the ball that we just set all of those to 0 right above here, I'm going to set those back to their normal speed. I'm going to put my player back because if you don't put your player back, it'll basically just start over wherever it was, which is just going to be kind of messy. And we also want to restart our ball. If you don't restart your ball or your player, you'll basically automatically lose every time you start because your ball and your player will be right on top of each other. Hopefully that makes sense. So that is how you would add in a quick button that basically makes this a little bit more fun of a game. To make it a little bit more difficult, let's see. Maybe we'll do that. What time is it? 3:28. let's see what other additions I can add in there. So if you guys have any projects that you want to share, I'll show you guys how to do that really quickly, actually. That'll be a really useful thing. A lot of people do this wrong. So we don't want to just copy this, can't think, this URL to share this project with people, because if we do that, they actually won't be able to see our project. So we are going to, I always just press save, but it does automatically save. So this is the project that I was just working on. You can see it's my first and my last modified. I'm going to click on these three little dots right here, and I want to click the share button. It's going to tell me, okay, you haven't created a link to view this yet, but if you just click the generate link button, it'll create a shareable link for you. So you just copy that, and then if I were to maybe open up a new screen and paste it in there, eventually it'll come up. Computer's a little bit slow with all the software running on it, but it'll be okay. All right, there we go. So now if I were to share this link with my friends or my family, or if you want to share it with us, there's a link in the description where you can share your projects that you've been working on. I'm really excited to see what you guys have been making. So please, please, please share it with us. That would be awesome if you could do that. So maybe take the time to do that right now. Give me just 1 second. All right, just gotta grab all the chargers. So, like I said, share your project with us. I'm really, really excited to see them. I really hope that you can take this project, make it into something unique, and make it your own in some way. So do that now. I'm going to sign out for this lesson, but I want to use this time to respond to any of your questions. So I'll still be, hopefully the chat will still be running, so I can hop in there and answer any of your questions. We also have a way for you to ask questions on the Code Naturally website. So use that as a resource. It's codenaturally.com. There's, you can request an account on there. You can check out any of our live streams that we've got coming up. There's a lot of different ways that you can use that website. So use it. All right, thanks for joining in today. This was really awesome. I'm glad that we were able to do this. Add in the comments if you thought this was an easy way to join in, or if you thought it was a little bit tricky. Add in if the volume was good for you, if the screen was really delayed or really blurry, if I need to zoom in farther. Let us know any of those notes nicely, and we will make sure to address them next time that we do this. All right, thank you so much for joining in.